You've made a lot of progress in lowering your blood sugar, but you're not quite where you want to be. Let me show you how to get there. Frequently, I hear from people who have brought their glucose levels down significantly by eating low carb, but they have stalled and haven't found a way to totally reach their goal. It may be somebody who has an A1C of 6.3 and they just stay around that range and they somehow cannot find a way to break down into the 5s. Or it might be someone who has brought their fasting glucose down from 250 milligrams per deciliter to 115. They have made wonderful progress, but now they can't seem to get that fasting glucose down below 100, where they really want to be. In other words, they've done great, and the finish line is in sight, but they can't quite seem to get there. In some ways, it reminds me of golf. The first time most people play golf, they play terribly. For 18 holes, they might shoot a 125 or a 135 or worse. Now, that's not very good. In fact, it's terrible. But that's how most people start out. If you practice and go to the driving range and play rounds of golf frequently, you will get better. And usually with enough practice and patience, it's not that hard to get your score for 18 holes down into the 90s or maybe the upper 80s. And that is, of course, a major improvement. But if you desire to get your score from an average of 88 down to 75, that's another story. You will find that although the strokes came off pretty fast at first, once you get closer to your goal of playing in the 70s, which is close to what the pros shoot, it gets harder and harder and harder. In other words, it's a lot easier to drop your score from 135 to 98 than it is to drop your score from 98 to 88, and it's still harder to drop your score from 88 to 75. Few golfers, in fact, are able to do it. Diabetes and blood sugar levels work about the same way. When you find you have sky-high blood sugar, it really isn't that hard for most type 2 diabetics to get those numbers down significantly in 3 to 6 months if they have a little motivation and some basic information. Many can drop their blood sugar from an A1C of 12 down into the mid or lower 6s in that time. And it is exhilarating to watch that fasting glucose drop from 250 to 200 to 150, and then down to 110, often in 6 months or less. It feels great. And if you end up with an A1C of 6.3 and a fasting glucose of 112 or 115, many doctors will be thrilled, and they'll tell you there's no reason for you to go beyond your present numbers. In their minds, you have won, and there's no doubt about it. You have seen fantastic, incredible progress, and you are to be congratulated and celebrated. But when you discover that others have brought their glucose down into the normal range or close to it, you realize you're not quite there yet. An A1C of 6.3 is a wonderful improvement over an A1C of 8 or 10 or 12. But it's not normal. It's considered a pre-diabetic level, just shy of the diabetes border. The same is true with the fasting glucose of 115. If you once had fasting glucose of 350, you know you've done very well to get down to 115. But here again, if you know much about some of the victories men and women are seeing over diabetes, you also know you should be able to do better still. If others who had severe diabetes can get their fasting glucose under 100, why not you? If others can get their A1Cs down into the mid-5s, why not you? But you seem stuck. While the numbers improved so dramatically at first, you seem to have plateaued. You're eating low carb, you're using the tool of time-restricted eating, but still you cannot seem to reach that promised land. Is there hope for you? And the answer is a great big fat yes, you can do it. But sometimes you need to employ a few more tools than those two most important ones, the low-carb diet and time-restricted eating. That's why I think of this video as 7 steps to get you across the finish line. Let's look at those additional 7 steps in no particular order. The first step I'll mention is exercise. I don't talk a lot about exercise on this channel because most of us can see amazing improvement without it. And it is folly to rank exercise at the same level as diet. Diet is far more important. But now this doesn't mean exercise cannot help you with your blood sugar levels. It's not going to drop you from an A1C of 10 down to 5, but it can help, and it can drop your glucose levels lower than they've been before you started exercising. In Dr. Richard Bernstein's classic book, Diabetes Solution, he has a chapter titled Using Exercise to Enhance Insulin Sensitivity. And that pretty much says it all. Anyone who's diabetic or merely has diabetic tendencies has a terrible enemy, and that enemy is insulin resistance. What these people desperately need is the opposite of insulin resistance, which is insulin sensitivity. And according to Dr. Bernstein, exercise increases insulin sensitivity. Your body becomes more efficient in processing blood sugar as a result. Almost any exercise can be helpful, but many experts believe that two of the most helpful are moderate exercises like walking and weight training, which converts flab into muscle. Dr. Bernstein writes, muscle building reduces insulin resistance. Insulin resistance, remember, is linked to your ratio of abdominal fat to lean body mass. The higher your ratios of abdominal fat to muscle mass, the more insulin resistant you are likely to be. Now, you should talk with your doctor first, but if he or she gives you the green light, you should start some kind of exercise program that ideally would include some walking or a treadmill or an elliptical trainer, plus some sort of weight training. I know you ladies can't build up the kind of muscles that men can, but you can still tone up quite a bit. You don't need a full set of weights. Doing push-ups on the floor will do nicely. And sometimes when a low-carb diet and time-restricted eating don't quite get you where you want to be, an exercise program can get you moving the right direction once again. A second tool in your toolkit could be taking the supplement called berberine. I take one of these berberine pills each morning, and it seems to help. There's been a lot of research on this compound, and its benefits seem to not only include lowering blood sugar, but also a number of other things as well. And some people have suggested that taking berberine is as effective as taking metformin. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know that when I take it regularly, it does seem to help me. It's not as powerful as the low-carb diet and time-restricted eating, to be sure, but it may prove to be one of those little things that, when done along with some other things, can get you moving to your promised land of near-normal glucose, even though you've been stalled for months at a level above where you want to be. A third simple tool to get you moving below that 100 milligrams per deciliter mark in your fasting glucose and dropping your A1C into the 5s is to further reduce your window of eating. If you're already doing time-restricted eating and you're not seeing the results you want to see, you might consider narrowing the window a little bit more. If you're eating during an 8-hour window each day and that's not getting you the results you need, consider cutting your window down to 6 hours. If 6 hours doesn't get the job done, you might consider a 4-hour window. So instead of eating only between the hours of 12:30 and 6:30, you might reduce that window so that you're only eating between the hours of 1:30 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. This doesn't mean you have to commit yourself to a lifetime of eating this way, but it can be a type of dynamite to blast away that obstacle that has been blocking your progress, and you can get yourself moving in the right direction once again. A fourth tool is to lose some more weight. When you first started on your low-carb diet, you lost weight automatically without even trying. But often people stall out short of their ideal weight. They've lost X number of pounds, but they're still 30 or 40 pounds overweight, and the weight is not dropping off like it did at first. One thing you can do is reject the idea that once you go keto or low-carb, you can eat as much as you like and stuff yourself with fats and proteins as long as you avoid most carbs. The reality is anyone can be overweight on a low-carb diet if they eat too much, and excess weight can interfere with insulin sensitivity. So if you're still overweight, even though you're doing low carb and you can't seem to drop any lower, you might consider rethinking that illusion that as long as you avoid high-carb foods, you can eat as much as you like and constantly gorge on keto snacks, keto cookies, keto cheesecakes, keto bars, keto this, and keto that. There is such a thing as self-control, my friend, and that still applies to those of us who eat low-carb or keto. A fifth tool to get you across the finish line is a weekly 36-hour fast. We're not talking about intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating here. I'm talking about real fasting, where you have your last meal at 6 p.m. on Monday and your next meal at 7 a.m. on Wednesday. In other words, you take one day out of your week and simply do not eat. When I do these 36-hour fasts, I drink black coffee, not the butter coffee, the bulletproof coffee that I sometimes drink. I do not have bone broth. Apart from black coffee, plain water, and maybe some water with a little lemon, I eat nothing. Now, you shouldn't do this idea of long fasting if you're taking insulin or really any diabetic meds. It's too tricky and dangerous hypos can result. And even if you're not on insulin or meds, you should still monitor your glucose levels carefully. Plus, you need to get your doctor's okay before trying this. But if you can do this, it is a powerful tool for taking your glucose right down into the promised land of normal. I'm convinced that of all the tools I'm sharing today, this is probably the most powerful. And as I mentioned the other day, if you cannot do a total fast, you could do a carb fast, where you eat carnivore for 36 hours and allow no carbs at all to enter your mouth. Now, when you fast, you're essentially resetting your metabolic system and lowering your baseline glucose level. A sixth additional tool in the fight to achieve normal glucose, beyond the big two of a low-carb diet and time-restricted eating, has to do with your dinner meal. My personal conviction is that the dinner meal is the most important meal of the day. If you eat a high-carb dinner or a late dinner or a high-carb plus a late dinner, you will pay for it all night long. Your glucose will never get to its baseline level as you sleep, and you'll have constantly high morning fasting blood sugar. Your time of sleep should be not only a rest for your brain, but also for your metabolic system. The last thing in the world a diabetic needs is to have their pancreas struggling to pump out more and more insulin all night long to deal with the carbs and sugars you've taken at your dinner meal. And it is far worse if you eat late in the evening, around 9 or 10 p.m. Additionally, it's much better if you do not eat a heavy dinner. Your lunch should probably be the biggest meal of the day. By dinner, eat light, eat very low carb, and eat relatively early, perhaps around 5:30 or 6:30 p.m., depending on when you plan to go to bed. That way, by the time you lie down on your bed, your body will have cleared out the few carbs you ingested for dinner, and you can sleep quietly without your body being forced to work like crazy to make up for your excesses at dinner time. And finally, the seventh tool is patience. There is a scripture which says, having done all, stand. Now, I know this was meant in a spiritual sense, but I think it also applies to diabetics employing all the tools at their disposal to achieve normal blood sugar and live free from diabetic complications. If you've done all you know to do, then it's time to stand and wait patiently for the results. If you're eating low carb and employing time-restricted eating and exercising and taking berberine and you've reduced your window of eating and you're getting your weight close to normal and you're doing 36-hour fasts if your doctor allows you and you're eating early, light, and very low-carb dinners, if you're doing all that, then stand. Be patient. Your victory is on the way. I want to remind you about my other YouTube channel, which goes simply by my name, Dennis Pollock. On this channel, I am uploading one video per week, and I call these videos Video Devos, or Video Devotionals. In these brief 6 or 7 minute talks, I discuss key Bible topics on all kinds of subjects, such as who will go to heaven, what about those who never hear the gospel, God's definition of a virtuous woman, predestination, was Jesus a conservative? Will God give me whatever I ask? The nature of hell. Is it safe to go with your gut? Did Jesus and Paul preach 2 different gospels? And a whole lot more. I also use historical events and biographies to illustrate biblical truths, including devos featuring Muhammad Ali, Bonnie and Clyde, the sinking of the Titanic, Mickey Mantle, Ulysses S. Grant, Heinrich Himmler, and others. So check out my video Devo channel, which goes by my name, Dennis Pollock. You may just find that the 7 minutes per week you spend watching these devotionals will turn out to be a solid investment of your time. And as a bonus, you'll see Benedicta there from time to time. A link to these videos is in the description.